Here we are in top 8 of the Red Riot Games 1K Pro Quest event. And I must say, this seems to be a particularly exciting top 8 match because there's a Levia on the board. I'm personally a big fan of the hero. I think she is very, very fun. Even if you do have to do a lot of work to get her where she needs to be. But it's also looking like this Levia opting to run Tunic over Husk is probably the low blood debt, heavy pummel based deck that we've seen pop up quite recently. And I'm going to say that that's a little bit confirmed on the basis that there is a Pursuit of Knowledge in hand, which is a great card to pummel and get both on hit effects. Our Chane player Michael opting to generate a rune chant, make a shackle, arsenal pass for his turn 1. Pretty standard. Levia beginning the turn. Oh, but there's a Fit for Scene in hand as well. So we're seeing very kind of a traditional mid-range play here. So we are pitching a card to play out the Pursuit of Knowledge. Which is going to demand something in terms of defense. And there it is. So one Ghostly Visit, and the Arcanite Skullcap is going to cover the 4 for Pursuit of Knowledge. Chane probably not too disappointed at having to lose a card this early in the game, as there's a chance that that Shackle is just going to make up for it. Can't quite tell what that weapon is, unfortunately. My guess is definitely not Hexagore, so probably Romping Club, or maybe Bone Basher, which is the fun uh, alternative to Romping Club, even though it is technically strictly worse. So Chane missing on that first Shackle Banish, pitching the Mavrian Skies, starting off very strong on the first proper, on then bounding Demigon, drawing 2, hoping to hit the non-attack or in hand, and now they've just got a lot of cards to play with. Opting to take the standard +1 attack. And then thinking about what the most efficient line here is my assumption. I think that was an Unhallowed that we saw briefly in hand there. So we are shackling for Unhallowed rights with no non-attack action target in the graveyard. Plus, it also didn't come out of banished, so we're not really seeing much of any of the benefits from it this turn. But it is still 1 resource for 5 damage, go again. Oh, and the rune chant is coming in as a reminder. So it looks like Levia is going to be taking 1 and 1 off of this. So now the question becomes, have these players decided to play the fatigue game or not? Judging by the 1 null rune from Levia, my guess is no. But Chane may not have known that when sideboarding in. So it'll be interesting to see. So what for just sort of war. So blocking. Let's swing big and a sigil of solace in hand. It looks like. So we're just paying 2 to swing the club. And then arsenal the sigil to gain some life at some point. Generally always good to keep it there unless you're replacing it with a D-reactor or an attack that you're looking to play. Interesting. Chane running the Nimbleism. Unfortunately not being able to use it as it's banished off the shackles. It's looking like fatigue may be a viable option here for Levia. Chane's already down on Art of War. Has missed 3 out of 3 shackles so far. Pitching the invert. And then coming in for the bounding for, I'm assuming 7 if it's a red. So it looks like we're taking quite a bit of damage from this bounding. I'm assuming that's because the goal... Oh, there's a pummel in hand. So I'm not sure if the plan is to play out the pummel this turn, or if it's to get the sigil out and then play it. Interesting. Chane holding a card in hand and then swinging Rosetta. So the shackle gave the bounding go again. And then this is going to be for 1 arcane, and then 2 arcane, and then 2 physical. But I think if you have the 3 cards necessary to pitch, pummel, or pitch, play an attack, and then pummel, you probably keep them. That is what the deck is designed to do, and you have that tunic counter coming up now as well. It would be nice to see updated life totals if at all possible. Help keep an eye on the ebb and flow of the game here. Because I think that turn single-handedly, taking I think 9 or 10 damage um, is a very clear indicator from Phillip that this is very much this is not going to be a fatigue game. But there's the swing big, and presumably the pummel coming on top of it afterwards. Well, we know there's a pummel in hand, and we know the tunic counter's there, the resources are floating. Additionally, that since, oddly enough, you don't want the bluff, but There's no harm in it, especially when it looks like there is a no-block Gorganian Tome in Michael's hand. So the swing big coming in for 8. If it is successfully blocked, then Michael will get a Quicken token, which is generally something you don't want to be giving a Chane. But I think Phillip is pretty confident that it's not going to happen, because even if the 8 is blocked, the pummel will come through over top of it, and chains aren't running D-reacts these days. So that looks like it's a red pummel coming in for the full 12. So pushing just as much damage as was taken last turn, forcing the discard, discarding a Shadow Puppetry. And we have the first chain hit of the match, which is a Shadow of Ursa. Fortunately, a Swarming Gloomveil hits the bin, as does a Mavrian Skies, which are some quality go-agains. Shadow Puppetry hit the graveyard here as well, so I think a good chunk of Michael's turn is going to depend on what is drawn off this Gorganian Tome. And that looks like a Time Snap potion in Michael's hand that he's now got. Which could be a decent turn ender, but I think with how aggressively this game is going here, you're probably always going to be better off swinging Rosetta. But it goes to show that there was definitely some degree of hedging done into a fatigue matchup here. So we're shackling up to 4, giving the Ursa go again, opting to not banish to give it go again. So it looks like Michael may have another slightly awkward hand here. Phillip looking like he took that 2 points of damage there. And then pitching to make a rune chant and presumably swing Rosetta. Oh, no, dropping the time snap. Interesting. So Michael very much taking a setup turn there. It's rare that you see a chain with 3 cards in an arsenal only threaten 2 damage on a turn. Hopefully Phillip has something to respond with. And so it's going to be Enlightened Strike. My guess is going to be 5 go again, because he has plenty of spare cards in hand to follow up the attack with something. And it looks like Michael has opted to take that damage. Now we're following it up with a Smash Instinct. So we're seeing some big attacks and coming in here. We are intimidating a card. Out comes the Husk. And the Arcanite Skullcap to cover all the damage. So, at the very least, that tells us that Michael is probably close to or at sub 20 life if he's putting the Husk out. So now he started his blood debt clock, even though Levia hasn't, because I'd be surprised if there were more than 3 cards in this deck with blood debt. Oh, there's the Eclipse and a Ghostly Visit. So very unlikely that Eclipse will be seeing play this game. Especially since we've seen at least one invert pitched already. And this game shaping up, I think, to be much quicker than Michael thought it would be, as he's having to kind of play around some of these more awkward fatigue cards like Time Snap Potion and Eclipse. So Time Snap Potion's being popped. So that's Toma Fyendel. We're drawing up. Michael's going to be getting a good refund on his life total, which makes the time snap play uh, much much more sensible rather than swinging the Rosetta, because it combos directly into this, lets you save, or lets you have more information when you play the Tome of Fyendel, gain you an extra life since you don't need to play the attack before you activate creepers to have played it otherwise. And now we're thinking based on the new revelations. All right. So our life totals are now updated, which is excellent to see. And we can see that the game is about as close as we thought it was. Chane now down a husk. So it looks like Phillip is learning what Urser and Eclipse do and how they interact. I think it's unlikely we're going to see that be relevant in this particular match, given how far along we are already. So I've seen Michael take up Shackle, possibly going to come in with the Ghostly. And there's the Sink below to cover the Ghostly, sinking a card, presumably taking the 1 Arcane off of the Rune Chant. There's Mauvrian Skies continuing the width of this turn, which you would expect to see from the draws off of Tome of Fyendel. So it wouldn't surprise me if we maybe saw our first armor block here from Phillip, just to stop that Rune Chant generation. Oh no, so the Bounding will only be coming in for 3 since it didn't come out of Banish. My mistake. So easy block with the 1 barrage and beatdown. And there's Swarming Gloomveil going to be coming in for 3 go again, since only 1 aura was generated this turn. And then likely a Rosetta for 2 and 2, and then an Arsenal. Oh, Enlightened Strike. So presumably that's going to be 5 go again, since he's not drawn a card. And you would never choose 7 because you've got the one floating for the free Rosetta afterwards anyways. So Phillip opting to take that damage and then block the Rosetta with the pummel, taking the arcane damage on top of it as well. Still sitting on that sigil in the arsenal. That's been there all the way from turn 1. Passing turn right back to Chane. And that's quite a good banish. You've got a non-attack action that can be played from banished. You've got 2 0 costs. One that comes natively with go again. Now, a couple of Michael's other hands have been a little bit awkward, but I think with a banish this strong, I don't think there's many combinations of cards in his hand that would prevent, you know, a a good turn from happening right now. So Shadow of Ursa banishing a Howl from Beyond. Oh, maybe Michael is setting up for an Eclipse. Unless he's just gonna play them out and come in with a bounding for 10 or something. So blocking again with the pummel for 2. Not that much of a drawback, as Shadow of Ursa only does come in for 2. Pitching the Shrill. One of the Howl from Beyond's coming out. Making a Shackle. There comes the bounding. Oh, possibly. He may be debating the use of Spellbound Creepers there. If he has a resource-rich hand. Oh, he was just debating coming out with the second Howl. Shackling, coming in with Bounding for, I'm guessing, 10, and then likely swinging Rosetta afterwards. So there's, looks like 6 points of block coming from Phillip. And there's the Rosetta for an additional 2 and 2, with the hands going straight to the life pads to update those. Oh, and blocking 2 with a skull cap there against Rosetta's physical damage, it looks like. Michael puts a card in his arsenal. Interesting. So Phillip stuck with 1 sigil in hand and 1 in arsenal. So I wonder what Michael thinks is in that arsenal at this point. It could theoretically be a pummel. And wow, 6 cards and just a bounding Demigon coming out for Michael. Which is, it just looks like this deck is very low blood debt, in all honesty. We've seen the Swarmings go by, we've seen the Enlightened Strikes go by. We've not seen the second or third Art of War quite yet, so it wouldn't surprise me if we saw one of those now. Otherwise, the odds of it being banished on subsequent turns just keep going higher and higher. Because there are really only, 2.5 turns or so left in this game before Chane runs out of cards or somebody runs out of life. So the progressive ticking of the husk, probably not super relevant. There's a Nimblism, which turns on Bounding Demigon, which can be played directly out of Banish now. And there we go, as expected. So this is coming in for 7. Phillip deciding on his blocks here. So blocking 5 of that, it looks like. Unless that was a blue bounding. At which point, it's all covered. There's Captain's Call. So breaking the chain, leaving a block with Scab Skin Leathers on the table again. Pitching a Bounding Demigon to come in with a Rift Bind for presumably 5? Presumably 5. But it is slightly unclear. It could also be 3 with Go again. And then a Rosetta Swing afterward, which would make more sense since it didn't come out of Banished. So that card that's being arsenaled is, my guess, not an Art of War, otherwise this would have definitely been the turn to play it. Yeah, and then here we have Rosetta for 2 and 2 again. Phillip only having the pardon me, the 1 Arcane Barrier other than Skullcap, so looks like, oh, he's got another Sigil in hand. Alright, so blocking 1 Arcane with the Tunic counter, and then blocking the physical with a card. Michael arsenaling, he's up to 7 shackles now, so there's really only about a turn and a half left here. Playing again the Sigil from hand. So there's no Arcane Barrier 2, but there are 3 Sigils, and they've all seen the table, albeit one is still an arsenal. Question is it enough to get past the upcoming invert existences? Yeah, and those are a lot of the awkward blues that we've seen get pitched by earlier. But there's also some quality here with the Unhalloweds and the Boundings. But this is definitely where Michael needs to have, a decent non-attack action in hand to play off of Spellbound Creepers to generate enough action points to put those attacks out and threaten the damage necessary. With so few turns left in the game, the life totals are very relevant now. So hopefully we can get an update on that. I know, unfortunately, the lovely hosts at Red Riot Games are a little bit short-staffed on the stream today. So they're doing their best to both run the tournament as well as update the screen when they can. So we're taking a look through graveyards and banished zones here, trying to figure out what threats still need to be worried about. Having a count of the deck, unfortunately that was off camera, so I couldn't quite see how many were left. But I can't imagine much is going to be left after the Shackle for 8 turn. So there's the Art of War. Choosing to banish the Bounding, draw 2. I'm assuming we're choosing Go again, because we've got 4 attacks in the banish zone that don't have natural Go again or ways of bringing themselves out quite effectively. Michael thinking exactly about the line of sequencing that he can play out here to, at this point, really just maximize action points and get, some threat back into the deck with that Unhallowed. So there's the Captain's Call. So there's a lot of pointing to cards, but it wasn't quite clear which effect was being applied on which card. So Bounding costs 0, so Captain's Call does have to apply to it. So presumably Art of War is granting Bounding Demigone a +1 here. Either that or it's granting it Go again, and then Captain's Call is granting it +2. So we're blocking out 6, it looks like. The nice thing about Brute is everything blocks for 3, except for the things that block for nothing, but you don't bring those in. And there's the second Art of War, banishing the Riftbind, pushing it over. Surely this one has to be Go again, because you're really stacking up those action points there. You know what? Maybe we do see Eclipse come out now. If he can find a way. He'll need one more action point to get there, which could be done with those Spellbound Creepers, depending on what he drew off of that particular Art of War. So we're blocking the Bounding with one card. Seeing the Shackle into the other Bounding, breaking the Chane. And there's the last card out of Phillip's hand. So anything else Michael can do is just going to be pushing a lot of damage. Does he have a way of continuing the turn, or does he just swing Rosetta Arsenal and see what the 8th Shackle flop offers him? I'm not sure if he has 1 or 2 cards left in hand now, unfortunately. Oh, there was definitely multiple cards there, so I'm sure we'll see something else exciting happen here. Michael's still thinking very hard about what to do with those last couple cards in his hand. Whereas Phillip doesn't have much thinking left to do. He's blocked with everything he's got other than his armor, and he's still sitting on that sigil in the arsenal. That may come out and be useful if Michael tries to win with a sneaky invert existence, because we've definitely seen Phillip block with plenty of both attack actions and non-attack actions here. So we've seen the life counter updated to 19, which is quite a bit higher than what I had been expecting. So with that, it looks like Phillip's in a very good spot at this point, actually. So we're going to see Nimblism, Captain's Call, Unhallowed, no Go Again, currently, but Spellbound Creepers is there, possibly offering an action point for generation. And now I think we're quite close to Eclipse being played out. I think if Michael can play one more Blood Deck card out from his hand and then that Riftbind, I think that's the 6 that he needs. But I'm uncertain, because these chain turns can sometimes take a long, long time. So we're pitching the invert to Spellbound Creepers, to Captain's Call, and then throw out that Riftbind. Which at this point will be coming in for 8. So, assuming the +2 is chosen from this Captain's Call, and it's at least a yellow or a red Captain's Call, the Riftbind would be buffed 1 for each of the 3 non-attack actions that have been played so far this turn, and then once +2 from the Captain's Call. That's immediately preceding it. Oh, so it looks like the Captain's Call selected Go Again, which gave the Riftbind 6 rather than 8, and then allowed the Rosetta swing afterwards. So I think Phillip has. Oh, he's down to 4 life on that counter. If Michael did side for fatigue, odds are he will get to banish a full 8 cards or close to it from this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's not what you particularly want to see when you're playing to fatigue, but there are a couple of invert existences in there, and a bounding, and I believe an unhallowed. So long as there are a couple of non-attacks in hand to help generate some of those action points, I think between Rosetta and the inverts, Phillip is in a very, very tight spot right now. There's the Soul Reaping. Wow. So we're banishing the Ghostly Visit. So Soul Reaping is going to be 6 with Go Again. So now it's just a matter of, can Michael generate the action points to play these cards out? With a Mavrian Skies, he definitely can. Mavrian Skies into Unhallowed. Coming in for 4. Maybe this is where we see 1 card and a Tunic just to block that Rune Chant generation. Since all of his other armor is already tapped out. So blocking with Pack Hunt for 3. Oh, maybe it was a blue or a yellow Unhallowed Rites. But we're ending this turn here with a Rosetta. And then presumably a couple Invert Existences. So Phillip at least gets to survive, albeit barely. Off of the strength of that Sigil of Solace in his arsenal. But it's going to be almost impossible to not leak a single point of damage to this Chane anymore. Assuming that that life total of 4 is accurate. Now, hopefully if that's a blue, he can then pitch to block 1 Arcane 3 times over. So Sigil of Solace coming out of the arsenal, bumping him up to 7 life. So assuming that's a blue. Yeah. So Michael will definitely get to survive this turn, even if those invert existences come down. But it looks like, having pitched that card, they will not be coming down. And Michael will just have the opportunity to play them all out next turn. Oh, there we go. That looked like it was the game there. Phillip knows that there's not much he could have done at this point, being out of sigils and not having the necessary arcane barrier. Well, it was, like many, a very hard-fought game for Levia. And unfortunately, it just didn't come out on top today for our low-tier hero. Michael looking very excited about Invert Existence, as just, it's a fantastic card, and it's now far and away one of the best ways to get Ursa out and ready to go, since it doesn't require an action point. You don't need to back it up with cards from your hand. You just need a resource point to play it out of your banish, and you're all set. So while these players have their debrief, we will set up for our next round, which will be our semifinal, and see what that brings for us.